When Bennett Nash opened her eyes, she was in her own familiar room, within her coffin bed. However, do not be too quick to ridicule it just because it was a coffin. After all, the coffin was a first CLA.S.S luxury item specifically made for her and was inlaid with a top-tier quilt stuffed with feathers that was crafted by the kingdom's alchemists so that she would be able to pass her time in comfort. It was one of Bennett Nash's favorite items. However, that was not the issue currently. The issue was that she had just woken up as per normal. The reason was because she had challenged Ruppas to the best of her abilities, lost, then should have died. "Oh, you have awakened, princess." The one who noticed straight away and reacted to Bennett Nash's awakening was a vampire who had been serving her for the past few hundred years. That vampire was an individual who had been alive since the transformation of the first progenitor of the vampire race and had sworn eternal loyalty to the race. Right now, this living witness of the olden times had a slightly distorted face full of wrinkles and was joyful from the bottom of his heart that his master had opened her eyes. Furthermore, after hearing him speak, 10 vampires came charging into the room with just enough speed so that the doors were not smashed into pieces. The 10 of them were survivors from the battle 200 years ago, and each individual possessed enough power to destroy a kingdom on their own. They were a group named the 10 Blood Ancestors, and it was needlessly evident that they were created and named whilst being conscious of Ruppas's tyrannical 12 stars. One Bennett Nash was looking at their faces, which were overflowing with endless joy, but there was only confusion and a multitude of questions inside her head. Why am I alive? The attack that she had received at the end of that battle was, without a doubt, fatal. She had, without mistake, been impaled through her heart. However unparalleled Bennett Nash's regenerative ability was, with her heart impaled, she should not have been able to stay alive. She had definitely sensed her life slipping away along with the blood which dripped out of her. She could recall how she became numb, starting from her fingertips, and that lethargic feeling as if she was slowly sinking down into a deep darkness. She had believed that if there ever came a time when she next opened her eyes, it would be in the land of the dead, and if such a world did truly exist, she was thinking that she would give Alioth and the rest who had said away before her a good punch. Yet why was it that she was still alive and in the place where she currently was? It is because of Amrita, my lady. The ultimate spirit medicine which cures the consumer regardless of their wounds or sicknesses and even resurrects the dead. Ruppasama had administered that medicine to you before you said away. What? But I don't remember her doing something like that. Whilst saying as such, Bennett Nash thought back to the events of that time. Wait. Was there really nothing? Was there not actually something that happened, that she could think of? Yes, exactly, that happened shortly after she had asked Ruppas to hold her. She recalled that there was some kind of fluid which flowed within her mouth. At the time, she had believed that it was her own blood, too. She got me. While I was fragilely and uncharacteristically asking to be embraced at the time, Ruppas was nonchalantly shoving Amrita into my mouth. Wah, how embarrassing. What an incredibly stupid scene. Not to mention, this meant that even though Ruppas knew that I was going to be saved, she was playing along with me. Bennett Nash's face was dyed red in no time and she trembled in embarrassment. She was terribly regretful of the fact that she had run her mouth and said embarrassing things such as hold me and thank you, thinking that it was the end of the line for her. Out. Princess. Everyone, get out. It was a brilliant showcase of someone venting at a bystander. Her subordinates were completely uninvolved and innocent. There was no reason for her to be angry towards them. However, at that moment, Bennett Nash just felt like venting at anyone she could find. She kicked all of her subordinates out of the room, then closed the coffin's lid and holed herself up inside. Yet, even then, she could not get rid of the bashfulness, thus she rolled around inside in anguish. The coffin, which was specifically made for her, was actually fairly wide. She rolled herself in her pains, bedding and screamed voicelessly inside the coffin. Sing, so Sing. Just then, Ruppas must have been laughing at me inside. No, maybe she was actually laughing. I remember that, sometimes, she actually had that kind of nasty personality. And I was so uncool, so uncool. Thank you. Damn it. I want to go back to the past right now and punch myself. And while I'm at it, I want to punch Ruppes like 100 times. No, 100 times is not good enough. I have to take a mounting position and punch her like 10,000 times. On this day, the history of the vampire princess was scarred by an unerasable black mark. That scar would remain on her for eternity and would serve as the fuel to fire her goal of defeating Ruppes. By the time she had finally managed to make a comeback from the damage that she had suffered and get out of her coffin, a whole full day's worth of time had already passed. Chibi Bennett Rapahesilu.s. From Alba Light novel, Chibi Bennett and Ruppes * Bennett Nash crossed her arms in front of Ruppes and stared at her with an angered expression due to the fact that her rival was, of all things, somehow getting cornered by someone other than herself. It was the same as 200 years ago. Even though Ruppes had made a promise to battle with her, Ruppes made a blunder and ended up being sealed away. And this time, even after Ruppes had won against her, she was getting cornered by mere spirits. Yeah, I know already. It's just me getting angry on my own. I was the one who raised the bar on my own, and now that things didn't go the way I wanted them to, I became angry on my own. I realize that's no different from a tantrum displayed by a child, and that I'm just putting my own selfish and unreasonable expectations onto others. However, emotion and reason were two different things. It just so happened that Bennett Nash had ended up prioritizing her emotions. That was why she could not stand it. That was why she was angry. She wanted to shout, "What the h.e.l.l. are you doing?" Therefore, she opened her mouth to try and say one or two of her complaints, but before she could do so, Ruppes spoke up first. "You saved me there, Bennett. Honestly, that was quite a dangerous situation." The Ruppes who said this to her with a warm smile did not have a speck of surprise for the current situation where Bennett Nash suddenly appeared alive and well. And it was only natural. It was Ruppes who had made Bennett Nash drink the Amrita. As such, it must have been within her considerations that Bennett Nash would show up in front of her again sooner or later. To begin with, there was no way Ruppes would kill Bennett Nash in the first place. It was because Bennett Nash was someone who was effectively like a guardian that allowed the humanoids to continue existing. Furthermore, Ruppes was not someone who was unable to understand the consequences of what would happen if such an individual was to be killed. Due to Ruppes's reaction, Bennett Nash lost her initiative and even forgot the complaints that she was going to say, so instead, she looked away from Ruppes with a pout. "Don't be mistaken. It's not like I came here with the purpose of helping you or anything. I just don't like the idea that you might get beaten by someone other than me." Bennett Nash looked away from Ruppes and directed her gaze towards Alioth and the rest once more. And when she did, what she felt was disappointment. Anger. Muffle is too, but beyond that, what the h.e.l.l. is with these guys? What exactly are you doing in this place? Even after you kept crying and saying that you made a mistake after what happened 200 years ago, it's come to this again. Are you planning to repeat the cycle all over again? But beyond that, what's not to my liking is, you guys, dead spirits. It's said that stupidity won't be cured until death, but for you guys, even after death, you're not cured of your stupidity. Bennett Nash had never once regretted the road she had chosen. Although she had just recently regretted the Imbara.s.sing words she had spoken, she would still never regret the choices she had made. It was because that would be a betrayal to herself. Therefore, regardless of the outcome that resulted from her decision, she would accept it and move forward. Whether that was good or bad, it was the way she chose to live her life. As such, she disdained Alioth and the rest. And she disdained the one who manipulated Alioth and the rest even more. She was annoyed at the ones who were doing something whilst knowing they would later come to regret it, and as for the one who was making them do it, they were completely out of the question. I originally came with the plan of punching Muffle, but there's been a change of plans. I can't bear to look at you guys right now. Before you guys can do anything more unsightly, I'll send you guys back to HELL. Bennett. Move, Muffle. You're being postponed. Bennett Nash's crimson eyes were filled with anger. What exactly was that anger directed towards? Was it perhaps directed at the disappointing Alioth and the rest? Or perhaps it was anger towards the G.O.Dis for playing with the individuals who once stood side by side with her as heroes even after their deaths. Or just maybe, it was both of those reasons, or maybe even for a completely different reason. For Bennett Nash, it did not matter which of those options it was. What was important was the emotion that she was feeling at that moment. Reason and logic would follow shortly afterwards. I will crush them to a pulp. Right now, that was her form of justice as indicated by her heart. That justice might have been derived from Bennett Nash simply not liking what Aelioth and the rest were doing, thus she wanted to punch them. It also might have been derived from her feeling of wanting to liberate them. But yet again, for Bennett Nash, even the underlying reason for why it was her justice was irrelevant. It was because regardless of whatever reason it might have been, it did not change what she had to do. Bennett Nash kicked the ground. Just from her taking a single step, the surface of the planet gouged in, changing the terrain, whilst the vampire princess herself became a silver shooting star which salted the heroes. By dilating the time she experienced to the extreme, the time around her effectively ceased moving such that everything except for light was unable to enter the world she was in, turning it into a world where the flow of time was as close to zero as possible. In terms of speed, she was moving at over Mach 400,000. At half the speed of light, that was a world which operated near light speed 3, that was the domain Bennett Nash resided in. And since she had matched her perception of time to that speed, if an ordinary person were to live for a duration of 1 second, she would have been able to maneuver for 1 year's worth of time. However, her opponents were the 7 heroes. Aelioth barely but somehow managed to reach the same world as her as he swung his sword. Different, huh? Clash. Bennett Nash's claws sliced off one of Aelioth's arms, and without even looking back, she moved on to attack the Beast King. Dubhe, who had previously gotten blown away by Leon, was down on his knee. However, after sensing Bennett Nash's blood-u.s.t, he proceeded to try and receive her attack. Dubhe howled and slammed down his strong arms filled with beastly strength. Nevertheless, Bennett Nash decided to take that attack head-on. Subsequently, she used her thin arms to stop Dubhe. Due to the strength of the two of them, the ground below them caved in, whilst the two of them stopped moving. A short contest of strength ensued. What followed was Dubhe's arms losing in strength against those of Bennett Nash's as he was lifted up by her. "You're also different." A single slash of her silvery claws. A red flower bloomed whilst one of Dubhe's arms danced in the air. The next to be targeted was Mizar, who was locked in a battle against Agakeros. Mizar immediately created multiple layers of strong walls and attempted to prevent Bennett Nash's attack. However, she charged right into those steel walls from the front, shattered them and cut his feet off. Fekta quickly fled the scene. Nevertheless, she easily caught up to him and gouged his torso out. You too." The silver shooting star rapidly flew around. Its movement was so fast that it even left the concept of time far behind itself whilst disallowing Aelioth and the others from even touching it. Correction, even if they were able to touch it, there would not be any significant damage done to it. It was because if one wished to defeat her, they would have to continually deal attacks which outdamaged her abnormally high regenerative abilities. Within a decasecond, the Sword King's blade slashed 100 times. The Beast King fiercely punched with a speed so fast that his fist looked like it multiplied. The Smith King trans.m.u.ted so many blades that it fully covered the sky like rain. The Adventure King's storm of arrows reached its intended destination before sound could do so. All of those attacks only ever managed to hit Bennett Nash's afterimage, creating a comical scene where nothing hit anything. Too slow, too lukewarm, too dull. What exactly are you playing at? This is so ridiculous, I can't even say anything. This is boring. You lot, when did you guys all become this much of a wimp? The vampire princess howled. Aelioth and the rest were not weak. If anything, now that they had the backing of the G.O.Dis, their statuses were superior to what they previously had. However, they were empty. Their hearts were not into it. They had no blood-u.s.t. With the way things were, they were no different from dolls which had copied their abilities and movements. As if such worthless toys would be able to take the vampire princess down. At that moment, Bennett Nash used her arm to purposefully catch Alioth's attack, which he swung down with all of his might, letting the blade sink into her bones. Looking at this scene, Bennett Nash felt a sense of disappointment. She even almost felt sad. Even though you devoted your whole life to your sword and that devotion was strong enough for me to recognize you, look at you now. To not even be able to take off my arm which I presented to you, how truly pitiful you have become. How pitiful, Alioth. If you were as you were before, you would have cut my arm away and probably would have sliced right down to my waist from my shoulder just then. At this moment, Dubhe punched Bennett Nash. For this as well, Bennett Nash decided to purposefully receive it with one of her arms. The bones in her hand cracked and turned in an angle it should not have. Yet, she only felt disappointment and nothing more. The strength of the Beast King who's able to shatter the Great Land is only this much, huh? If you were the Beast King that I knew back then, you would have at least splattered my arm just now. Bennett Nash sighed like she was exasperated from the bottom of her heart and moved to counterattack. Against Alioth, she used the half-amputated arm. Against Dubhe, she used the arm which was shattered. She punched and sent them flying, shattering Alioth's sword and breaking his sternum, and pulverizing Dubhe's arm and caving his skull in. Seeing what happened, Fekta quickly knocked his arrows and rapidly fired them repeatedly. Nevertheless, Bennett Nash closed the distance between them directly from the front, again, without bothering to defend or dodge the attack. The arrow dug directly into her eyeball whilst the arrow which touched her fingers shredded them. Nonetheless, she was not perturbed. As if everything that had happened was unrelated to her, the places that were shredded instantaneously regenerated back whilst she came to stand before Fekta. What's wrong? You can't even pierce through a single body like mine? Your fame as the master of the bow, who could even pierce the Dragon King, is crying. One shot of a knee kick. With just that, Fekta's ribs were shattered. Furthermore, those shattered bones lodged themselves into his inner organs. When Bennett Nash turned to look at Mizar whilst she pulled out the arrow which was sticking out of her eyeball, there were a countless number of golem warriors. Those golems simultaneously leapt towards Bennett Nash, each swinging a weapon of their own. However, it was futile. The blades that managed to hit her neck shattered in return, the swords that stabbed into her heart bent and broke whilst the golems themselves were all scattered away by a single sweep of her arm. Equivalent to toys. Even if you have the technique, you don't have the mindset. Your true weapon should have been the eccentricity behind the ideas of your inventions. If you can only reuse what you've already used before, you won't be able to reach the distant place that I'm in. Bennett Nash disappeared suddenly, yet grabbed Mizar's head before any time had said. She then slammed him into the ground, the resulting impact causing the Great Land to shake. The vibrations reached even the faraway kingdom of Svalin, causing the Wisdom King, Migrez, to be sent flying upwards from his seat and crash into the ceiling. Whilst she continued to hold on to Mizar, Bennett Nash dived deep into the ground, reaching the middle parts of Midgard where the mantle was. In terms of temperature, it was approximately 6,000 degrees C4 in terms of pressure. Its Serpa.S. said 100,000 atmospheric pressure. Yet, in this world of death, she continued to run about easily, eventually coming out from the other side of the planet. She then continued to fly beyond Midgard without losing her speed until she reached a random small planet in her way which she shattered to pieces before she turned back. After re-entering Midgard's atmosphere, she slammed Mizar into the ground and said through the middle of Midgard's mantle once again 5. She then popped out of the ground and, just using her physical strength, threw Mizar, who was burning up in flames, towards Dubhe and Alioth, Squish.H.I plus NG the three of them together. It's unpleasant to look at the current state the four of you are in any longer, you should disappear without a trace. Moon attribute arcane magic, Catastro 6 hold it, Bennett. Bennett Nash proceeded to try and finish the four of them off by activating arcane magic whilst she herself was regenerating from the burns all over her body. However, Ruppaz halted her. They're Argonautai that will resurrect back up indefinitely. You mustn't kill them. I see. After hearing Ruppaz's warning, Bennett Nash changed the arcane magic that she activated. Moon Attribute Arcane Magic Luna Tentacle. She activated the arcane magic that was greatly favored by Agakeros, which created tentacles made out of darkness to bind the enemies. She then used the skill to immobilize the 4 heroes. She then gave the 4 individuals one last glance. At that moment, only Rupaz, with her extraordinary kinetic vision, caught a momentary look of sorrow on her, and, as if she had lost interest in them, turned her back to them. Author note, Ms. Garzud, staff. She's coming inside me. I'm getting felt up insidey. With a deep voice, dig a hole, penetrate through the planet, the G.O.Dis, can you stop using planet-destroying skills as if it's the most normal thing in the world? Asterisk by the way, in regard to the hole Bennett opened up, leaving it on its own would have been bad, so Rupaz used alchemy to fix it up. Q. Can Bennett fly in the sky? A. She cannot. However, the speed at which an object falls is fixed and Bennett is able to move about before she falls that 1 millimeter. In other words, since she's faster than the speed at which gravity sand can pull her down, she is able to bounce and leap about, therefore as a result, it looks like she's able to fly. If you can leave time behind, you should be able to fly 7. That certain vampire San from that world was also flying in the anime, so there's no problem. There's no problem 8. Although, in Bennett Nash's case, she's a monster that can already jump beyond the stratosphere using nothing but her leg strength, so there's really not much difference from being able to fly. Q. Catastro. What? A. High-tier Moon Attribute Arcane Magic Catastrophe. 9. The skill is a total annihilation arcane magic with the effect of turning the moon's mana into a countless number of lasers that carpet bombs Midgard. When Bennett uses this arcane magic, she is able to instantly scorch 30% of Midgard. However, because the mechanic of the arcane magic is to fire lasers from the moon, whether it be in the game or in this world, it cannot be used unless there is a moon. Bennett was originally planning to use this skill to turn the Dragon King, Pollux, and Argonautai, including the 7 heroes, into ash. I suppose with Bennett's competence, she would be able to avoid firing at the Allies' kingdoms, however, the amount of damage Midgard would have taken would still have been pretty significant. Bennett-chan is a super problem child. The G.O.Dis, STOOPPP. Leon, why are you here? Whilst Ares was fallen on the ground, he looked up at his unexpected rescuer. The relations H.I+P between Leon and Ares could not be called good by any means. If anything, it was not a mistake to call it the worst. It was not as if Ares particularly hated Leon. However, Leon clearly looked down upon Ares and held him in contempt. Leon had always called Ares a small fry monster since a long time ago, and he was not the type of person who would try and help out even when Ares was about to be killed by the enemy. If anything, he probably would have just said, an end befitting a small fry, and would not even think anything else of it. Leon was the kind of man who evaluated an individual based solely on their strength and considered strength to be absolute justice. That was why this was a seemingly impossible situation. I came because I smelt a very familiar smell, but it looks like you guys are having quite an extravagant party. A banquet like this is wasted on a small fry like you. I'll devour the rest for you. Leon's mouth distorted whilst his still technically humanoid face turned savage and ferocious just like that of a wild beast. Snap, snap, with that sound, Leon's muscles expanded, making his already bulky and log-like arms even thicker. Veins popped out all over his body and the surrounding air distorted just from the heat that was generated from his body, forming a mirage. Just keep lying there and watch. I'll show you the way I fight. Leon clenched his fist and disappeared from the spot. The next moment, he dropped his fist onto a heroic spirit who was engaged with one of the other 12 stars, Cruz.H.I+NG that heroic spirit along with their armor and collapsing the ground below them. With just one hit, despite being strong enough to be called a hero, the warriors' limbs became twisted in weird angles and they suffered enough damage to where they became unable to even move. Furthermore, Leon rushed into an area densely packed with heroic spirits and, just from his body hitting them, sent tens of heroic spirits flying. Of course, the heroic spirits did not just stay quiet. They all took hold of their swords and proceeded to hack at Leon. However, In the face of this situation, the Lion King for some reason put his hands in his pockets and received it head-on in a defenseless manner. The result of that, he was completely unharmed. The attacker's swords shattered into pieces, yet Leon's skin did not even suffer a single scratch. A single kick from Leon then crushed all of the powerless warriors at once whilst he walked to the next gathering of heroic spirits with what could be called a dull and sluggish movement and his hands still in his pockets. In response, the heroic spirits this time fired all sorts of arcane magic. High-tier arcane magic of all attributes was sent flying towards Leon and exploded on him. If someone were to have been looking at Midgard from S.P.A.C.E. at that moment, glimmers and explosions which shone from the arcane magic would have been visible, even from that far of a distance. The scale of the explosions and impacts were just that big. However, Leon charged straight in through this storm of arcane magic and, as if nothing had happened at all, came to stand in front of the heroic spirits. Worthless, not even enough as an appetizer. One magician, who was unfortunate enough to have been standing at the very front of the pack, had his head grabbed and was then swung around as an improvised weapon. Violence known as hitting a person using another person. With each swing, the magician broke a little more, scattering his flesh and blood upon the other heroic spirits. The pitiful magician had completely lost his humanoid shape by the time he was finally released, having become chunks of raw flesh. No, perhaps the one who was the most unfortunate might have been the young magician boy at the very back of the pack. The reason was because he was the one who was forced to suffer from fear for the longest amount of time. Eek! The young boy, who was surprisingly young to have been T.I. a hero, released a shriek and instinctively drew back. But reality was cruel. In the very next moment, a strong arm thicker than his waist directly hit his head. After the impact, everything above his neck was gone and blood was spewing out of what remained of his body. Whilst bathing in the blood spewing onto him, Leon directed his bloodshot eyes at his next prey. Looking at this scene, Rapaz thought to herself, who exactly is our enemy here again? However, it could not be helped that she thought this way. Ugh. When Leon roared, a countless number of heroic spirits in front of him were shredded and sent flying as if they were pieces of paper. The Lion King's roar was not just a simple thing used for intimidation. A simple roar. Even that was accompanied by destructive energy that said through the enemy camp, causing the surrounding land to be gouged out and the nearby air to be dispersed. The enemy warriors' eardrums ruptured and their bodies warped as if they were being squished by a huge invisible pressure. It's Saker. Leon disappeared once again. Keeping track of his extraordinary speed must have been difficult even for his fellow 12 stars. Many impacts and shattering noises repeatedly and continuously resounded. As if the air around them was exploding, the heroic spirits started getting blown apart in groups. Needless to say, it did not just happen once or twice. One after another, many places within the army of the Argonautai spontaneously exploded. Each time, heroes of the past were blown to bits and pieces. There was not enough time to avoid the attack, yet, if they tried to defend against the attack, their guard itself would be destroyed. And what made it possible was strength. Just raw strength. As long as one possessed overwhelming strength, there was no need for special abilities or effects. His fists relied on raw strength without any accompanying techniques. His wide motion kicks could not be said to be polished by any means. Yet, he gave the heroic spirits of the past absolutely no room to retaliate as he smashed and shredded them as if they were pieces of paper. The strong are called strong because they are strong. It was a very simple quote that was easy to understand. Unnecessary fillers were not needed. For Leon, unique abilities and such were something akin to street performances. To him, those kinds of abilities were something acquired by weaklings after shedding tears and wasting their efforts so that they could desperately pretend to be someone strong. It was something unnecessary and useless in Leon's mind. As long as he had his body, it was enough for everything. He possessed fists with such overwhelming strength that it was unnecessary for him to obtain those tricks. Therefore, he punched. Therefore, he killed. With just that, all of his attacks which had the motions of an ordinary auto-attack turned into sure kill secret techniques. The purest form of violence. That was what led him to be recognized as the strongest even within the tyrannical 12 stars. If every single attack that he executed dealt fatal damage, then there was no need for him to use any special offensive skills. If, just by standing, the wall known as his muscles could break enemy swords, then he had no need for any defensive skills. The Lion King bared his fangs and ran around the battlefield, leaving mountains of corpses everywhere he went. With the way things had developed, there was nothing the Argonauti could do. No, perhaps there might have been some options they could take. Although they might have been far inferior to Ruppas and the 7 heroes, they were still heroes of legend who had managed to reach level 1000. Collectively, they possessed an enormous number of skills, arcane magic, and divine magic such that depending on the way they combined their techniques, let alone barely manage the current situation, they could even turn the situation around. Depending on how they utilized their skills, it was not impossible for them to even completely shut Leon down just as the 12 stars had done once in the past. However, that was a scenario only possible if they could work together. As a mere gathering of Ma.S.ses who acted on their own, they dragged each other down and obstructed one another. There was no way they would be able to play the optimal hand that they might have possessed. The heroic spirits were vanquished one after another without being able to show even half of their full potential. By the time Leon next emerged from the battle, the land was fully soaked in their blood. Not enough, it's still lacking something. I mean, without the main dish, you wouldn't be full, would you? Whilst saying that, Leon looked at the Dragon King provocatively. Hearing this, all 10 of the Dragon King's heads agreed with what Leon had said, recognized him as a worthy enemy and bared their fangs. In the past, before Ruppas showed up, the 2 of them were the strongest of the magical beasts and were at the apex in terms of battle prowess. They also each maintained a quarter of the power balance on Midgard. Now, the Dragon King Lawton and the Lion King Leon met each other face to face for the first time. And, above all else, these 2 were very similar to one another. Both were tyrants. Both were violent. They oppressed and ruled over others through violence and fear. These were the overlapping points the 2 of them shared. Leon's body expanded in size and the clothes that he was wearing ripped and were blasted away. His whole body became covered in hair as he got rid of his humanoid appearance and turned back into his original appearance of a lion. What appeared at the end of this transformation was a monstrous lion which was big enough to rival even the Dragon King. Finally, the 2 tyrants, who had each bared their true nature, were glaring and growling at each other face to face. At that moment, Pollux, who did not want to get caught up in the middle of all of this, jumped off the Dragon King. On the other hand, the city of Lajarn was in complete and utter panic. It was only natural. After all, there was suddenly a mythical battle of legendary proportions happening outside of the city. It would have been strange if they were still calm. It was an unbelievable scene where historical heroes, who could only be encountered in books, were being sent flying one after another. That alone would have been enough to go beyond the tolerable limit of their brain capacity, yet this time, there was a 160m tall lion and a 170m tall dragon with 10 heads. Alfie had already fallen on the ground and was mumbling as if she had gone insane, and Friedrich had started digging holes in the ground after coming to the understanding that he was not able to run away outside. Cruz was shouting, "It's the end of the world," in a crazed fanatic state, whilst Sarja seemed to have suddenly become enlightened and was muttering something meaningless like, "Living and dying are all of equal value, maybe it's the will of the big universe." Yeah. Meanwhile, Jean was screaming, "I'm also going to fight," and, as a result, was trying his best to try and get out. On the other hand, Gantz was calm and collected. Due to the innkeeper losing consciousness, he had made himself some coffee that resembled muddy water and was frowning after saying that it tasted disgusting. You're really calm and collected." SEI sat on the chair and received a cup of coffee from Gantz, who was sitting on the other side of the table. Next to him was Virgo, who had stiffened due to the bitterness of the coffee. Hydra vs Leo, the Dragon King vs the Lion King, illustration from Alba light novel. I mean, nothing's going to happen if you make a fuss about it. Their battles are in a realm that we can't comprehend. Even if we cry or scream, it's not going to change anything. In that case, isn't it better to just drink a cup of coffee like this? B. But, aren't there other things you could do, like, try and calm down everyone that's panicking? That's impossible. The whole city is under a ma.s.civ hysteria. Even if we say something, they're not going to listen to it, and what we say will just be m.u.f. fled by the surrounding noise. Not only that, in the worst case scenario, we'd become an outlet for the mob's anger. In the first place, those are the responsibilities of the N.O.Bless. It's out of our pay grade. Well, if you're talking about the N.O.Bless, Rupa-san just squished them. I forgot about that. Gantz looked outside the window. There, what he saw were the people of the city moving about in confusion and shouting incomprehensible things. He then wondered why people lost all order and control when they fell into a panic. Furthermore, he honestly questioned why Cruz, who just so happened to be part of the hero's entourage, was one of those people. Meanwhile, the whole Friedrich was digging hit a hot spring that was flowing underground, and he got blasted back out of the hole by the water pressure. What exactly was this tiger doing? Ruo. Jai. The two giant monsters both released a war cry and clashed directly with each other without any small tricks. They most likely chose to first compare what they were both most confident in, their raw strength. Due to the shockwave caused by Leon and Loden clas.h.I plus ng with each other, the barrier which enveloped Lejarn creaked whilst the surrounding area was a.s. salted by a sonic boom. The entire area other than Lejarn was shaved away and turned into a barren wasteland, yet the two monsters who caused that catastrophe continued to compare their strength without even minding what had just happened. There was no option for retreat. It was a duel of pure strength in order to determine who would come out on top. However, presently, Loden had the advantage. His 10 heads all moved at once and bit into Leon's body. Against Leon's strong skin and muscles, the even stronger fangs of Loden pierced in, gouged it out, and shredded and chewed on it. But as if to match that, Leon opened his mouth and bit into Loden's body. Leon's teeth bit and shattered the Dragon King's scales, which were believed to be harder than anything else in this world, allowing him to pull apart the flesh underneath it and swallow it. Luna, who was watching this gruesome scene, tightly held her mouth shut with her hands and tried to resist the resulting sense of queasiness. They're devouring each other, even though they're getting eaten themselves, they're eating their opponent, they can't be sane. Both of their bodies were soaked in blood, yet their movements did not dull. The next to move was Leon. He opened his large mouth wide and released a roar point blank at Loden. His destructive roar, which was a condensed form of mana, swallowed up the Dragon King's body, vaporized the ground in its path and continued on forward. It eventually went beyond the domain of the humanoids and destroyed a lone island which just happened to be in its path, creating a ma.s.civ dome-shaped explosion. However, Loden was alive and well. Furthermore, as if to say, right back at you, it opened all 10 of its mouths simultaneously and exhaled a raging H.E.L. fire from all of them. Individually, a single fireball was strong enough to instantly vaporize something like a humanoid city, yet Loden was continuously firing such fire A.L.L.S from all 10 of its mouths extremely rapidly. It was like a machine gun which fired missiles, so to speak. Pillars of flames caused by the explosion rose up one after another, whilst Loden gave no mind to the fact that he was getting caught up in the explosion himself. Luna tightly hugged Terra in the heat of the moment and tried to become a.s.h.I plus Eld which would protect him from the impending shockwave. At this moment in time, she was well aware that she was no different from an insect in the face of these monsters' banquet. Nevertheless, she was still one of the 7 luminaries. She believed she was enough to at least be a.s.h.I plus Eld. She tightly hugged Terra with such a tragic determination, yet, however long she waited, the heat that she was predicting would reach her did not come to pas.s, thus she opened her eyes whilst feeling confused. What she saw then was the back of Rupas, who was standing in front of her with one of her hands stuck out. The insignificant area of S.P.A.ce behind Rupas, which was created due to the barrier she had put up, became the only safe haven at that time. Flames which were like floodwater flowed behind Luna and Terra whilst she herself felt like she was inside a GLA.S.S vase looking out towards a red raging stream running past the vase. Don't stick your hand out carelessly. If it's you, just by coming into contact with this shockwave, you'll be turned into ash. It seemed she had been helped by Ruppas. Realizing this, Luna first felt a sense of relief, followed by a question and then confusion. She was thankful that they were, or rather, at least Terra was saved. However, she questioned if it was fine for Ruppas to be not worrying about her own subordinates. Notwithstanding, she quickly understood that it was an unnecessary worry of hers. In this torrent of extremely hot blasts of wind, the 12 stars were observing the battle between Leon and the Dragon King without minding the shockwave in the slightest. However powerful the attack itself was, its shockwave was still just a shockwave in the end. It was not enough to shake them. No, if one were to look carefully, only Libra, whose weakness was fire, had Karkanos stand in front of her as as.h.I plus eld. They're monsters. Every one of them. They were all standing nonchalantly in that h.e.l.lish ridiculous heat which could even melt and boil boulders. Bennett Nash was even sitting down on top of a boulder. However, that boulder was in the process of being magnificently melted too. In other words, she was essentially sitting on magma, yet she was not minding it in the slightest. In the first place, the vampire princess was a monster who had just dug and swam through the inside of Midgard's mantle too. Something of this degree could only make her feel like it was a little bit warm. In the face of these battles which were in a different dimension from hers, the only thing that Luna could do was learn that her side was trying to recklessly fight a battle where they had no chance of winning. Thank you so much, Fairy Princess Sama. With the divine sword that Milady has bestowed upon me, I will definitely defeat the king of the demons and bring peace back to the world. Yeah. If it's you, you will definitely be able to achieve that. Please take care on your journey. This conversation occurred a few thousand years in the past. At the time, the world was on the brink of annihilation by the hands of the king of the demons, who was leading the army of darkness to wipe out the humanoids, when the hero rose up together with his trusted comrades with whom he had tightly knit and strong bonds. To those people, Pollux bestowed legendary equipment, taught them the king of the demons' weakness and sent them on their way. On a journey of death that she knew for certain they would never be able to return from. After sending them away, Pollux lowered her head. How stupid! Why is that no one ever raises any questions? Even though everything is going far too smoothly. The king of the demons' weakness? Don't make me laugh. There's no such thing. After all, that thing is a divine beast created by the G.O.Dis to manage the world. He is one of the pillars which make up the arbitrators. He is an agent of the G.O.Dis and has the same sort of existence as my real body. In the face of such a thing, there was no way for the humans to be able to win. People were just not made by the G.O.Dis to be able to win against that thing. If they fought with each other seriously, the outcome was already predetermined. But even then, the heroes were likely to win. That was how the scenario was completed. The king of the demons would be defeated, and after a few thousand to tens of thousands of years, when the G.O.Dis judged it to be necessary, he would change his name, change his appearance and terrorize the humanoids once more. The humanoids did not know. N.O. Body knew. That all of the evil kings who appeared in the legends and histories were actually the same individual. The destruction G.O.D appeared when humans were first created from the Flugel race and was only defeated because the first human, Aeneas, sacrificed his life to do so too. The beast G.O.D threw the world into war and turmoil during the age the beastkins first came into existence. The T.I.10 G.O.D led the army of giants and rampaged to its heart's delight. This time, it named itself the Great Demon King, and the next time it appeared again, it would be named something else. But the humanoids did not know that they were all exactly the same person. Furthermore, she herself was one of the actors in the scenario. She was a Grim Reaper who disguised herself as someone who helped out the humanoids, whilst inflicting them with the poison called hope and sending them to certain death. That was the true identity of the fairy princess. Although they were separated into the two roles known as ally and enemy, there was no difference in substance between the two of them. That was why she couldn't help but spew forth poison. So stupid. Why do they look at me with such honest eyes and believe in me? Doubt me. think that something's wrong. Shouldn't you be able to figure it out if you think about it a bit? That there's only neatly and conveniently placed weak magical beasts near your starting city so that you're able to become stronger. That you were handed weapons and equipment so that you could gradually get stronger. And that there's this suspicious woman called the fairy princess who just so happens to know the enemy's weakness. However you think about it, isn't it just weird? I'm begging you. Doubt me already. Please stop getting fooled. Until this moment, Pollux had sent off heroes many times, many times. With a smile, she guided them, handed them weapons, gave them advice and provided them with trials so that they could become stronger. And she would realize it every time. Their desires from the bottom of their hearts for the peace of the world was unmistakably real. They were people worthy enough to truly be called heroes. There was once a young man who told her that he loved the world, but he died without being able to see peace arrive in the world that he loved. There was once a swordsman who told her that he would become as strong as he needed to be for the sake of the person he loved, but by the time peace had arrived, he was already dead with and alongside the person he loved. There was once a cheerful man who told her with a hearty smile that he wanted to show a peaceful world to his children, but he died without even being able to see the face of the child who was born. There was once a kind female warrior who journeyed to certain death despite being a woman for the sake of the people important to her and for the future, but right now, there was not even a single trace of her bones left in this world. Everyone was guided to certain death by Pollux. Just as the scenario willed it to be, peace returned to the world and the hero dramatically said away in a beautifully adorned manner. I can't anymore. Pollux's well-featured face became disheveled and distorted. She covered her face with her hands and collapsed down on her knees. Their eyes, full of trust, were heartbreaking. Their words, full of gratitude, were painful. As they told her of the future that would come once the world was peaceful, their figures were so dazzling to her, yet it was so sad. Just how many of those heroes, who should have had their own futures, did she let die without helping them? Rightfully, they ought to have been the ones who were rejoicing once peace was restored in the world the most. So why was there a need for them to die? Either way, their lives were short. The lifespan of a person was at most a few thousand years even if they were of a long-lived race. She had always thought that it would have been fine to let them spend their lives however they wanted to as a reward for the difficult battle that they had to go through. But the G.O.Dis hated leaving overly strong individuals who possessed too much power alone. That was why, every time, he would deal a fatal wound to the hero before purposefully pretending to be defeated. That was why, the hero she had just sent out today also wouldn't be returning. He would not be able to reunite with his lover who told him that she would be waiting for his return. Pollux always prayed that they would not come to her. However, the G.O.Dis, who was the object of that prayer, desired for that outcome. That was why they would always appear before the fairy princess without fail. They were guided by fate. Would it be fine if she did not lend them a hand? No, if those individuals were so half-baked that they would stop at that, they would not even be able to arrive before her in the first place. Furthermore, in those cases, the hero would just challenge him without possessing enough strength and die needlessly. At that point, the dead hero's son or their relative would inherit the curse known as becoming a hero. What if she just announced the truth of the matter? That was also a no. Even if she did something like that, she would only shorten their lifespans. The G.O.Dis most likely would not let go of people who knew the truth. How many times do I have to repeat this? How many times do I have to fool them? How many more times do I have to kill those children? Answer me, please. G.O.Dis-sama, I don't want to do this anymore. Pollux's spirit was already almost at the breaking point. She did not want to do the job of stepping on brave flowers that were trying to bloom in this deprived wasteland. She had repeated that process endlessly for tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of years. Because she loved the people who were being born. Because their appearances as they desperately tried to live even in a world like this was dazzling beyond anything else. After repeatedly looking after people from many different periods of time, she had started to feel affection towards them like she would towards her own children. She wanted to protect them. She wanted to hug them. She wanted to free them from Hell. However, the reality was the complete opposite. She was nothing more than a Grim Reaper who would drop them down into Hell. She was nothing more than a heretic who stepped on flowers. It would be for the best if someone like me didn't bud in the first place. If she had remained an avatar, how much easier would it have been? If she was just a spirit who was being controlled by her real body, she would not have had to suffer through such a painful experience. Pollux took out her short sword which she kept for self-defense and aimed it towards her own throat. That's right, it'd be best for her to disappear. It would only be appropriate for someone like her to disappear. Stop it, Pollux. However, her hand was stopped by the other half of herself, her brother. Pollux tried to shake her brother's hand away, but her arm strength could not compare to his. Please let go, older brother. No, I won't. Castor tightly hugged Pollux. Pollux was devoid of so much vigor that it felt like she would immediately disappear if he did not do so. Whilst Castor slowly calmed his sister down, he could not help but curse the G.O.Dis. Ah, God omnipotent G.O.Dis, Alovenus. Why do you treat her so badly? Pollux is not a girl who can bear such a role. She is far too kind to be able to continue doing this. He wished he could exchange places with her. He wanted to exchange places for her. But it was impossible. The heroes would, without fail, come to seek an audience with the fairy princess. In all likelihood, the G.O.Dis applied her hand so that they would hear information that would drive them to seek her out. And his sister was someone who would answer if she was sought after. It was because she knew that the situation would only get worse if she did not do so. In the end, he was just a byproduct that was left over from the creation of the supreme being known as the fairy princess. He had no talent other than to fight. A good-for-nothing fairy. A recessive product which was thrown away in the process of giving birth to the dominant product. However, Pollux could no longer continue playing the role that she was given. She had reached her limit. If this continued, she would break. Even if she were able to slowly recover from the mental scars that she had suffered over the long years that had passed, the wounds would only be reopened along with a new scar. And the repeated process of the still healing scars being pried open had caused Pollux to reach the current point of no return where her wounds had become too deep. Her feeling of guilt never disappeared. It only continued to weigh her down at the bottom of her heart. It would have been for the best if she was someone who was irresponsible enough to be able to forget about it all. It would have been for the best if she was rational enough to be able to leave it behind the horizon of lapsed memories. However, Pollux was not able to do that. Because she was unable to do that, she was slowly breaking apart. That was why Castor prayed. Anyone was fine. Someone who could destroy this H.E.L.lish place in the most literal sense. Someone who would show up to rip and throw away even the G.O.Dis's scripts. He had almost given up after being convinced that such a thing would never be possible. It would have been for the best if he had not prayed. A few thousand years later, Castor was deeply regretful of his prayer from the past. On that day, the embodiment of H.E.L.L that repainted H.E.L.L itself stepped into the land of the fairies. Her black wings assert an ominous presence. Her beautiful face, bri.m.m.i.n.g with absolute confidence in herself, would make even beasts smile. Behind her was an army of magical beasts which were on standby. Using a special skill available in her position as the fairy princess, she checked the level of the intruder only to almost faint instinctively as a result. The level of the intruder was 4,200. What is this monster? Wrong. This was definitely not a hero. As if she would be able to bear a hero like this. Having said that, it was not him either. This was not an existence which was prepared by the G.O.Dis. To begin with, the G.O.Dis, who had let previous generations of heroes die because she hated people with too much power, would not create a senseless thing like this on her own. Furthermore, wasn't this woman ignoring the level limit set by the G.O.Dis? She had heard about it in rumors. There was an existence which he, who was currently calling himself the Demon King, was truly afraid of and was avoiding direct confrontation with. However, Pollux had thought of that as nothing more than an exaggeration. After all, there were many others in the past who were being made such a fuss for no reason. But the troublesome part about this time was that it was actually true. What should I do? This person might ignore the scenario and actually kill ORM. This was not a scenario made by the G.O.Dis. It would not be a fabricated victory as if it was scripted in a play. This was a real monster who could even fight against the serious ORM, defeat and suppress him in a direct battle, then come out as the true and authentic winner. Without a doubt, it was a bug in this world which had appeared naturally, independent of the G.O.Dis's will. With that in front of her, Pollux asked a question with a shaky voice. Do you have some business with me? Yes. I've heard that there was a fairy princess who used some mysterious techniques in this land. I thought it would be interesting to welcome the G.O.Dis's underling as my subordinate, so I came here. Well, speaking candidly, I came to tame you, fairy princess, Pollux. And you, her brother, Castor. They were speechless. It took her a few seconds to even comprehend the words which were spoken. What? Am I going to get tamed? Am I being treated as a magical beast? Until this moment, there had been a countless number of times humanoids had visited the land of the fairies. There had been countless times in the past where she had been the target of prayers like "Please help us, fairy princess." There had also been countless times where she had been begged for advice. However, there had never been a fool who had come with the intention to capture her, until now. She wouldn't have been able to bear with it if there was. Needless to say, it's fine for you to resist. You too also have the right to refuse. If you do not wish to serve under me, you should struggle with all your might. Then we'll do just that. Castor raised his anchor up and the Argo, which carried the heroic spirits, levitated into the sky. The sister summoned and the brother commanded. With that, the undefeated invincible cheat skill Argonautai was completed. However, the black-winged woman took one look at the S.H.I+P and lightly jabbed at it. Immediately afterwards, a Ma.S.Civ hole opened up in the Argo and it began to go down in flames and smoke. Wait, did the Argo just sink? Is this some kind of a bad joke? Did she just sink the Argo with nothing but the pressure from her fist? That S.H.I+P is as hard as Orichalk.U.M, you know? This was truly an existence which defied logic. No, perhaps it was actually logic who disliked her and was running away from her with all its might. Meanwhile, the summoned heroes were all rendered unable to move just from coercion alone, whilst the fairy siblings were barely able to simply sit on the floor. She didn't know. She didn't know someone like this existed. To put it another way, this was AH.E.L.L, which Serpa.S. H.E.L.L, a despair which shattered despair. It was something unreasonable that trampled on the unreasonable, something irrational that destroyed the irrational. And she was someone who ripped and threw away even the G.O.Dis's script, an existence that she had long been waiting for. That woman stood in front of Pollux and looked down into the eyes of the fairy princess. Your eyes are like those of a dead person. I see that you're really feeling the weight of the role that the G.O.Dis.A.S. signed to you. What is it? What is there to be surprised about? Did you think that I would not know about it? Sure, I realize that I'm not actually someone that's particularly clever, but even I would notice something that's this blatantly obvious. You and the Demon King. For people who are supposed to be opposing each other as light and darkness, you guys sure seem to be balanced out perfectly, as if it was arranged beforehand. And it's not just that. You see, Migres decoded a stone slate that was hidden deep in some ruins, and by the looks of you, you've been repeatedly confronting the same person over and over and over again. It's just like a pendulum that swings back and forth between light and darkness, back and forth between hope and despair. So I'm convinced of it, you see. The two of you are colluding with each other. I'm spot on, am I not? Rupaz raised Pollux's chin using her fingertips and looked into her eyes. You must have suffered after fooling people countless times and letting them be killed without being able to help. Your mind must be getting really worn out from wondering how many times you'd have to repeat the cycle. Rejoice, this is the last time. If the G.O.Dis will not answer, I will answer it for you. The curtain that signals the end of the play will soon arrive. Once that is done, you will no longer have to send anyone to certain death. Because I will destroy the stage of the play altogether. Listening to the words spoken by Rupas, Pollux finally realized that she was dealing with a devil. An evil devil which went against the G.O.Dis. This woman was exactly that. However Pollux thought about it, this woman was moving whilst completely ignoring the G.O.Dis' script. For someone like her to have been born must have been completely outside of the G.O.Dis' calculations. But, how ironic. That the one to tell her the words she wanted to hear the most would be the devil. No, was it because she was a devil that she knew what Pollux wanted? I'll bring back true freedom to this world which is being bound by a third-rate play. For that purpose, I want you, become my subordinate, fairy princess Pollux. That was an evil temptation. It was a road of snakes that would lead to a betrayal of the G.O.Dis. The heroes would not be able to tear through the G.O.Dis' script. If anyone could do it, it would be this monster who was out of the norm. That was why Pollux took hold of that hand. Even if it turned out to be the road to self-destruction, she no longer wanted to pluck any more flowers. The Argonauti had mostly been sorted out and weakened to the point where they would not immediately die, and Agacaros had apprehended them. Alioth, Dubhe, Fecta, and Mizar were also neutralized. And Pollux's final hope, the Dragon King, was currently locked in a grand battle with Leon. In other words, the opposing side was almost out of personnel. I stepped out of the barrier that I had erected to protect Luna and Terra and stood in front of Pollux. Although there was a heroic spirit of an elf in front of her, it would not be a match for me. Or rather, I did not even feel like fighting it. After all, if I were to defeat it, the barrier which was protecting Pollux would disappear and she would be burnt to death. In any event, we had a winner. She no longer had any chance of victory. Looks like this is checkmate. Or do you still have a hand to play? If that's the case, I suggest that you quickly take them out. I'll make you submit straightforwardly without any small tricks. For some odd reason, my body doesn't function properly if I'm fighting against the 7 heroes, but there won't be any problem against others. It doesn't matter if it's the Dragon King or a hero of the past. Just come at me. I cracked my knuckles and awaited Pollux's next move. In that case, I'll meet your request. Come and dance, the origin of the Flugels, the one who governs the stars of heaven. Ura.n.u.s. A light shone down from the sky and lit up the ground like a spotlight. On the spot which was lit, flowers began to bud and a man with pure white wings and white clothing began to descend downwards while enveloped by a G.O.D-like radiance. A halo glowed on his back and there were 3 wings on each side, totaling to 6. A bunch of young Flugels of both genders had been summoned alongside him and hymned whilst they circled around him as if they were celebrating his advent. The man called Ura.n.u.s was displaying an affectionate smile as he very, very slowly descended to the ground. Yes, so very slowly that it was irritating. Come down quickly. Gua. Flew above him and punched him down so that he would get to the ground faster. The land shook upon his impact, whereas the guy himself, who had dropped down, had his arms and legs bent in weird directions and was foaming from his mouth. What is this? Isn't he quite fragile? I thought he would be ridiculously strong because he was called the origin of the Flugels, but he's no big deal at all. It seemed he was killed in a single hit as he disappointedly turned into light and disappeared. The Flugel children, who were around him, were scared witless by my action, thus they were shaking quite vigorously and had slumped down. By the way, the reason these guys were not being burnt was because the barrier protecting Pollux was still there, but the flowers which sprouted just then were burnt by the Dragon King's H.E.L. fire's shockwave. Then how about this? Manifest before me, the origin of all humans. You, the founder of the human race and the first guardian of the sanctuary, Aeneas. Answering Pollux's summons, particles of light formed into the shape of a human. Subsequently, what appeared was a half-naked man who liberally exhibited his body without any hesitation. It might have been fine to call him a handsome young man with that appearance, but even then, it was still unacceptable that he only had a single cloth covering his waist. No, I actually understood the reasoning. After all, he was the first ever human being, in other words, he was like an extremely primitive man. Although it sounded nice to call him the founder of the human race, to put things bluntly, it simply meant that he was born during a time when there was no civilization. Therefore, the real thing was like this. Although, it did not change the fact that he was still an eminent individual. Wear some clothes. Bu-bu-woo. The man, who received my fist, was sent spinning away and disappeared into the far distance whilst splattering in all directions. I thought in my head how he did not return any decent response when I punched him. However, there was an answer to that query in my memory. It seemed that the role of guardian of the sanctuary could only be said down to and held by a single individual. Therefore, once their generation was over, the levels and the skills of the previous generation were said down to their successor. It was probably the work of the G.O.Dis who did not want to needlessly increase the number of strong individuals who were at level 1000. And at the same time, I understood why. The reason behind why all of the guardians of the sanctuary throughout history were strong even though they were humans. Apparently, Aeneas underwent the ritual right before his death. In other words, the one who had just been summoned was nothing more than an empty SHE.L.L who had lost all of his power. Argonautai might have been a skill which resurrected the hero of the past in their prime state, nevertheless, even it could not bring back power which had been lost because it was already said down to their successor. Well, either way, even if that was not the case, as he had been given the T.I.Tle of Guardian of the Sanctuary, he should have at least had enough power to rival someone like the current Migraz who was in a weakened state, but, someone like that was no match for me. Next. As you Wisconsin H. Plus in that case, here's something special. Summoned in the past from a different world. An existence which was bestowed great divine power and restored peace to the world. Appear, the hero of another world. Thunderclaps resounded whilst a single man giving off sparks appeared before me. His well-trained body was like steel. He had S.H.I plus ning black muscles and a sparkling bold haircut. His manly face was like that of a beast and even his eyebrows were shaved off. He wore boxer pants and boxing gloves. A boxer, who was clearly not a J.A. Payne's person judging from his 190 centimeters height, was shouting I am the champion, and was doing shadow boxing. Alovenus. This is, a long time ago when I prioritized strength and called a person over, something like this came out, and I mean, if your only criterion was their strength, I suppose something like this would most likely end up coming out. Yeah. That young boy SEI is actually an amazingly normal hero. I was just reminded of that again. Or more like. I have no idea what this guy's been saying since a moment ago. I can't speak English, you know. Why is it that even though J.A. Payne's automatically gets translated to a common language in this Midgard, English remains the way it is? I thought Xgate Online had integrated every language around the world. As a side note, because this guy tried to spread the language that he speaks, in Midgard, there are some people who speak untranslatable words. It seems, there are people like your Krebsan who speak that language due to their personal preference though, so it's this guy's fault. Nice punch. So Karkanos's style of speaking in English is this guy's fault? The moment I thought that, my fist caught the hero boxer and sent him flying over the horizon. Seriously. Even though this is supposed to be somewhat of a serious fight, stop calling in weird guys already. Anyways, don't tell me that was the greatest card that you had. Goo. It doesn't matter what it is, just come out. Heroic spirits, I summon you. It seems she had really been pushed into a perilous position. Pollux desperately moved around and activated the Argonautai skill. However, although she could summon an indefinite number of times, each summon only had one soul. A spirit which had already been summoned and captured alive by us could not be called again. In other words, Her remaining playable cards were truly limited at this moment, and it was unlikely there were any significant ones left. I was thinking such a thing, however, in the very next moment, my predictions were proven wrong in a different way. I was called, so I have appeared. The one who appeared was that annoying guy, Mars, that I punched into the distance once upon a time. He took a glance at me with a lofty air and, backed by confidence from who knows where, smiled at me as if he was assured of his victory. He then drew his sword and started to run around me in a circle. Now is the time for me to show you the true ability of I, who has returned from the dead. I apologize, for I had held back at that time. I had misjudged your strength wrongly. But this time, I will not be lenient on you. This Mars, a member of the 7 luminaries who bears the T.I.Tle of fire, shall burn you with all of my ability. Only an instant, in other words, the equivalent of the amount of time that you would experience in the Ring of Time. My resurrected self's true ability and the shockwave of my soul. Fire and diamond dust, by mixing 2 antithetical powers together, at this moment, a new and evolved sacred chaos is born. These powers Hushanti have merged together, take this moment of miracle in the eternity of time, evolved beyond their time in order to move to the future. Play for me, O flame. The requiem of despair. Sing for me, O ice. The symphony of blessing. You are already caught. There is no longer anywhere for you to run. Your path has been closed off by the unknown. Be afraid, be frightened, and celebrate and give praise. This is the moment of light that was given creation by me. You shall see it at the moment of your death. A kind embrace that invites you to become nothing. Scatter. The ultimate secret art, Grand Crimson, Diguran, 1 shut up. I punched the fool who had a needlessly long monologue as usual into the air and banished him to the end of the sky. At this moment, I was far more used to this body than I was when I fought against him the first time, therefore, even if I had the same stats, the power behind my punch was completely different. Furthermore, as Alcade was still active, my stats themselves were also completely different. After looking on and noting that the moon, which had shown its face after the day had entered evening, had gained another crater, I turned back to look towards Pollux. Rupas vs Mars 2 Rupas 1 HKO that guy, Mars. Again. Illustration from Alba light novel. Looks like you really have run out of cards to play. There's still the Dragon King. Pollux looked towards the Dragon King as her final hope. However, just as she was doing so, Bennett Nash sank the Dragon King into the ground with a single punch, knocking it out. By the look of things, Bennett Nash, who had gotten bored of observing the battle, had subjugated the Dragon King by punching it from the side. After having his prey stolen from him, Leon was complaining. However, Bennett Nash undauntedly told him, "It's because you were taking your sweet time fighting against it." Thus, they were in the middle of bickering with one another. Nevertheless, that was irrelevant for now. So, what were you saying about the Dragon King? Gyo. Anyways, you should have had enough by now. Get out of Pollux's body. Yet, after hearing my recommendation, Pollux smiled cheekily. And, as if to say, if you want to attack me, go ahead and do so, she opened her arms wide. No, the one who is at a loss is your side. Are you able to attack this body? If you want to defeat me, then that's fine. Go ahead and do so. However, just know that if you are to use your power to attack me, this girl will no doubt end up dead. Tisk. Although it aggravated me to admit it, what she said was correct. As long as she did not leave Pollux, there was nothing that I could do. Although there was the option of attacking her using blunt edge strike, in all likelihood, she would not leave from something of that degree. It would be the same as needlessly harming Pollux. If the state that she was in was some kind of a status debuff, there would be a countless number of ways to remedy the issue. However, it was not any kind of a status debuff either. Cutting only the mana away using Lithrasir, that was also no good. After all, the G.O.Dis was not using mana to possess Pollux. Using some sun attribute arcane magic which would only damage spirit-type enemies, that was also probably not going to work. Using some warrior skill which would deal damage to SP and not to HP, was out of the question. Her SP was infinite, therefore, as expected, it would be meaningless. What should I do? Is there some method? Pollux, don't lose. While I was standing still and unable to do anything, Castor had come to stand beside me without me being aware of it and spoke to Pollux. He was not speaking to the G.O.Dis. In all likelihood, he was speaking to Pollux, who was in a deep slumber. Persuasion, huh? Although I doubted that there would be any meaning to it, because Castor was the other half of the twins, it was possible that it might have some form of effect. Let's leave it to him for a moment and see what happens. This is truly a pitiful scene. We've been waiting for this exact moment for a long, long time. A script for a play which lasts indefinitely. Deaths that repeated over and over again. You were always crying because you hated that. Now is the time to go beyond the script. Right now, we have to get away from the G.O.Dis's third-rate script. Grab hold of freedom with your own hands, isn't that right, Pollux? Third-rate. After hearing Castor's persuasion, Pollux's face visibly became depressed. What the? Alovenus got damaged so easily. Now that I recall correctly, she got called a third-rate by Bennett Nash just recently. What seemed to be the G.O.Dis's power ever so slightly separated from Pollux's body, as the light of rationality returned to her eyes. Is it correct to assume that Pollux is resisting from the inside? It's not like the G.O.Dis got depressed and left Pollux's body of her own accord, right? In any event, this is a good chance. If we can do something about that, we'll be able to save Pollux. But, what exactly is that? Is that a skill? Is it arcane magic? Or is it divine magic? No, if I had to describe it, it's the very essence of power. A fragment of the G.O.Dis. And I don't have the means to deal with that in any way. If it's Vindemiatrix, no, it's no good. It's probably meaningless. Something, isn't there something? Call me. Suddenly, a voice resounded in my head. The voice that I heard was something that I had only heard once before, however, it was something that I could never forget. In all likelihood, it was from the time before I, had become me, or it was a voice I had always heard back when I was still an adventurer. That was exactly why it was so strongly ingrained within my memory. Call my name, my friend. Should you do so, whatever is happening at the time, I shall become your sword. Ah, that's right. I had forgotten that there was you. Forgive me. Even now, I have yet to wake up. But I'm joyful that even in this state you would still recognize me, as me, In that case, entertain me. Use that power of yours to your heart's content. Divine and arcane. A gate of S.P.A.C time opened by two kinds of powers. Thou, who possess the arm of destruction that breaks apart all contrivances. X gate. Come, Taurus. No, asked Ryan. Whilst calling Taurus's real name, I clashed divine and arcane power together, opening a hole in the world. Taurus was A.T.I.Tle, which was conferred by me after the creation of the tyrannical 12 heavenly stars. In other words, it was the name of his position. It was not his true name. As those like Ares did not originally possess a personal name, the conferred name became their actual name. However, it was not the same for Taurus. And there was only one individual who knew of his true name in this world, me, Answering my summons and appearing before me was an existence with a reliable appearance that was no different from what it was 200 years ago. Someone who could be said to be my partner in arms. Swinging his coat around himself, a giant who possessed the T.I.Tle of the bull manifested before me. There was purple lightning running and splaz.h.I+ng out of his right arm, and the eyes behind his mask caught sight of the enemy which had to be taken down. Aldebaran. The unleashed skill was a technique which destroyed and forcibly cancelled an enemy's power. Whether the root of that power was divine or arcane in nature was irrelevant to this skill. The strike, which could even crumble and shatter the G.O.Ds scripts, was shot towards the G.O.Dis's fragment that was coming a little out of Pollux and violently tore it apart. A crack split open in the S.P.A.C.E time continuum and forcibly separated what connected the G.O.Dis and Pollux together. And, as if a hammer or something of the like shattered a boulder, a thunderous sound resounded, dispersing away what was punched. Well, that was probably just the smallest fraction of the G.O.Dis's power, probably an extent that's not even worth a single strand of her hair, but even then, that was an incredibly cheat-like skill. If my subordinate screams this much of a cheat, my standing is in a little bit of danger. Truly, how reliable. You've become a lot more like yourself compared to the last time we met, Ruppaz. Still not completely though. Hearing my friend's words, I lightly smiled and answered. Although I can't see his face due to the mask that he's wearing, well, it's him after all. I know that he's probably cheekily smiling right now. I thought that he might as well show his face since he was in his humanoid form. However, this was one of the quirks that Astrion had. Just like with his real name, it seemed that he did not want to show his face to anyone except for me. Even though he has a huge frame, he's someone that could be described as delicate or feminine. Well, that's the interesting part about him though. Subsequently, I watched as Astrion got swallowed up by X-Gate and was summoned away. Meanwhile, I shook my head and recollected myself from the disorderly thoughts that I was experiencing. Dam.N, just then, I completely became Ruppaz. No, maybe I was taken over by her? It almost became the state that I had reached when I was fighting against Bennett. This isn't good. I feel that the boundary between me, and Ruppaz is becoming more and more vague. Whilst staring at Alioth and the rest who were being forcibly unsummoned after the G.O.Dis had been separated from Pollux, I directed my attention towards Pollux who had lost consciousness. Next, I want to meet the true you. As I was thinking such, author note, the G.O.Dis, Omega third rate, anyways, with this, the battle against Pollux has concluded. Aeneas, whose name was famous in the past for a good reason, completely became a comic relief character. Wait, that's not right, it's just that he was having a bad day. Anyways, even if he had the power that he had at his prime, as long as he was within the constraints specified by the G.O.Dis, however strong of a character he was, he wouldn't be able to win against Ruppaz. However, since I had brought out most of the strong enemies like the Dragon King, Leon, Bennett, Alioth, Dubhe, Fekta, and Mizar, we will enter an easy mode for a while. Although, honestly speaking, the only ones left which might be able to fight against Ruppaz are the Demon King San and the 5 Ouroboroses. The G.O.Dis, Omega. THIRD, RATE, __, This chapter has too many fancy terms and weird sentence structures, angry face, and LOL rip the G.O.Dis's psyche. But quite an anticlimactic way to end an otherwise fairly exciting arc anyways. I believe this chapter marks the end of this arc and an arbitrary second act of the series. Next chapter is a transition chapter, but from now on, the series will be addressing the main storyline and unraveling all of the things we had built up until this point. Please enjoy. TLN, I/my/me of this chapter is in or unless specified otherwise. It was the day after the battle against Pollux, who had been manipulated by the G.O.Dis, ended. We had rented the Innsmost S.P.A.Sias room and almost everyone was gathered there. The 12 stars and I were a given, the young boy SEI, Terra, Luna, and even Bennett Nash were also here. However, as you would have understood from the moment I said almost everyone, not everyone was here. First of all, Leon. He left after the battle ended. He had said that he had no intentions of getting along, but really, it was just like him to act in that way. And there was one other person. Dina, who had disappeared right before Pollux's raid, was also not here. At the time, I had simply thought that she was having an awfully long toilet break and nothing more. Notwithstanding, she did not show herself even after the battle had ended and, needless to say, she was also not in the bathroom. Her whereabouts had become completely unknown. Therefore, at this moment in time, with the exception of Leon and Dina, everyone was gathered in this place. And one more thing. Although it was a very joyful miscalculation, once the skill Alcade was deactivated, compared to the activated state, my own thoughts and consciousness returned. As I had predicted, that skill called and woke the real Rupas up. Although I might get stronger, that skill's trade-off was quite detrimental and self-destructive to me. Overuse is no good, was what I would have wanted to say, however, it was a skill I would no doubt have to use when it was time to face the Demon King. In that case, you guys no longer have any intention of fighting against the humanoids anymore. That's right. Now that we know the true nature of what the demon race is, I don't intend to predict .I.P.8 in a rigged compet.I.Shin that I know I'll end up losing. The one who answered my question was the Demon King's son, Terra. On another note, oi, this B.A.S.T.A.R.D, he's so handsome to the point that it's irritating. Even compared to the actual hero, the young boy SEI, he had such a good-looking face that it was as if he had "I'm the protagonist" written all over his face. It was as if he was completely overshadowing and eating up SEI's presence. Even the young boy SEI was muttering, wouldn't it be fine if this person just became the hero, and seemed to have lost some self-confidence. If we asked a completely irrelevant third party who did not know anything to choose who they thought was the protagonist after being told that our battle was a part of a fantasy game, they would most likely choose this guy. His face was just that N.O.bly and good-looking. Explode and die. You say that, but isn't it actually just because you're scared of Rupas-sama? Agakeros flamed Terra in a provocative way. If I recalled correctly, previously, Agakeros took a loss against Terra at Blutgong. Either way, Agakeros's action was a little childish. That may be the case. It's quite a miserable thing, but if it's me, I wouldn't be able to win against her. On the other hand, Terra easily admitted the possibility and did not show any sign of being caught up in the provocation. Oh, he's such an adult. He's handsome looking on top of being calm and collected like a good adult. What is with this guy? You make us look like a band of bad guys in comparison, so you can show off a bit more of your shortcomings, you know? Ah, we actually are the bad guys. Rupas-dano. Even though there's someone from the demon race in front of your eyes, are you not going to kill them? If it was the me of the past, I would have killed them without a second thought, but the current me is not so cold-hearted as to attack an enemy who has already surrendered. If you really want it to be done, you can do so yourself. No, that, The elf Nii-san was shouting something, but I swiftly brushed it aside. Having said that, it was not like I was going to prevent the humanoids from defeating these demons. After all, looking at the current situation from their shoes, the ones in front of me were from the demon race, not to mention one of them was the prince himself, thus it might not have been easy for them to be forgiving. That was why I would neither affirm nor deny the way they thought of things. If they really wanted to defeat them, then they could fight with each other themselves. Yet the elf Nii-san did not say anything else and quieted down. Well, he must have been hoping that I would say something like, the demons should be killed, just as I did 200 years ago. Or rather, because I now hold someone else's point of view, I can say this, but the me of the olden days was just too cold-hearted. Or it could also be said that I gave no allowances. I possessed the power to destroy the world, was merciless and not to mention cold-hearted, so let me say this clearly. It was only natural for me to have been betrayed, and only natural to have been abandoned. The problem is, that I'm definitely closing in on that point. Libra, have you managed to locate Dina? No, I can't find her at all even though I've been searching for her since yesterday night. It is very possible that she is no longer in this city. I see. Even using Libra's detection ability, we were still unable to ascertain Dina's whereabouts. As Dina was able to run away to any location using X-Gate, it would be easy for her to escape out of Libra's detectable area. Due to the natural progression of deduction, the question of why she ran away at this timing came up and I suspected that answer had something to do with Pollux. Perhaps Pollux possessed something, some sort of information that was detrimental to Dina. That was why Dina ran away. If I thought in that way, everything would be resolved. Then, let's talk about Dina first. After all, fortunately for us, there's someone who knows about Venus in this place, Dina, you say. In response to my words, Pollux tilted her head. From the looks of it, she had not heard of the name before. When Pollux responded in this way, Libra took out a piece of paper and started drawing at a rapid speed. And what was created in the end was a drawing of Dina's face elaborate enough for a person to mistake it for a black and white photograph. You could do something like that? Pollux received the piece of paper and looked at it seriously. And she started cold sweating quite heavily. Rupa-sama. This person was around you until recently. That's right. She named herself as the advisor that had been with us since 200 years ago. Though, honestly, we already knew that was a white lie. What were you thinking? She's the G.O.Dis's avatar, you know? Other than the fact that she's wearing different clothing, isn't her outer appearance completely the same as the actual Alovina-sama? What did you say? Or more like, the person who sealed you, Rupa-sama, is none other than her. I personally saw her help out Alioth and the rest in the battle 200 years ago by using the SUBSP.A.CE seal technique. What did you say? Or rather, I didn't expect that at all. Honestly speaking, I was fairly sure that Dina was the G.O.Dis's avatar, but to think that, let alone help out, she was the very person who sealed me. I see now, no wonder Dina ran away. The moment that woman, B.I.T.C.H, felt that Pollux was closing in on us, she ran away at full speed. Even A.S. Summing that she had a thin presence, I could say that it was too careless of me too, or more like, why did you even appoint a person like that to be an advisor? If you knew that it was a lie, you should have dismissed her. Well, no, I thought I'd let her play for a bit. Are you stupid? You're stupid, right? You only let a person play around if the other party doesn't notice that you've already figured out their lie. If they know you've already figured it out, then it's meaningless. Libra, you too. Why is that even though you're with her, you allowed such a dumb thing to take place? I'm in such a deep state of apology that I'm high above the mountains. You're not repenting, are you? Let alone being deep in apology, you're climbing high above the clouds. Soon, I'll leave out of the atmosphere. You piece of metallic Traz.H. Plus in front of Pollux's very scary and angry look, I was in such a deeply emotional state that I did not even know what to say. Pollux Dina Libra Rupa's Pollux has common sense. Ilu.S. Tration from Alba light novel. Oh, she's a very decent individual. Nothing like the decent, lol, people that we had until now. She's someone with actual common sense and a normal way of thinking. This is it, the thing that the 12 stars were lacking. Such a well-executed retort, Tsukumai, just then. She must be the one that I was searching for. Rupa-sama, if you have some time afterwards, can you let me know of everything that has transpired up until this point from the time of your resurrection to the extent that you can remember? Knowing you, Rupa-sama, you've probably, no, actually, you've definitely overlooked some things. Here. Pollux took out a piece of paper from her pocket and started noting things down. I used my peripheral vision and lightly peeked at what she was writing, but from the looks of it, she was organizing all of the information that she had gained from the conversations that we had up until this point. What a competent person she was, this Pollux. Seriously. Even though I know Rupa-sama has always been a muscle brain, it still makes my head hurt. You guys too. Instead of affirming and enabling everything that Rupa-sama does, give her some proper advice. Why exactly do you think the 12 stars exist? Of course, to use my whole body and everything that I have to fulfill all of the wishes Master has. Silence, goat. The duty of the 12 stars is to make up for the areas that Rupa-sama lacks in. Rupa-sama might possess an overwhelming amount of power, but she's not omnipotent. That's why, to cover for the things that she can't do, all sorts of idiosyncratic individuals were gathered and formed into the tyrannical 12 heavenly stars so that they could serve as her own limbs. In particular, when it came to her actions, ever since the past, Rupa-sama has always been a hot-blooded muscle brain who just charges straight in without thinking. So someone at her side has to act as her brain, but of all things, to think that she had infiltrated into that very position of the brain. Pollux spoke in a very irritated-sounding way, then started to look at the 12 stars in a reproachful manner. Meanwhile, I was made aware of quite an important new fact and was feeling quite surprised by it. I see, So it wasn't just me that was a hot-headed muscle brain, but also Rupa's. On the other hand, the 12 stars who were made to suffer Pollux's reproachful looks responded without feeling ashamed. But I'm not that smart. Me too. There's no way this mistress would object to what Rupa-sama does, would I? Me is also not good at thinking about things. Well yeah, I'm also not in charge of having to intelligently think through things, so I'm also not good at those kinds of things. After hearing Aries, Agacaros, Scorpius, Carcinos, Castor, and Sagittarius answer, Pollux held her head in anguish and muttered, "All these muscle brains." When she did, this time, Virgo shriveled up in a pitiful state. Seeing that, Pollux became fluid teared and quickly followed up with, "Oh, it's not your fault, okay." Pollux really was the type to worry, I see. Following this, Pollux proceeded to stare down Libra, but Libra turned her head 180 degrees and avoided her stare. Libra. The only one who could have acted as the counselor while I was away was you, isn't that right? Why did you let Rupa-sama go astray? An issue has occurred in my hearing system. I am unable to hear what you are saying. What a convenient system you have right there, huh? You piece of metallic trash made. Pollux signed out loud like she had gotten past the point of exasperation, then turned towards me to stare me down. Rupa-sama. Why, yes. Now that I'm back, from now on, I'm going to be managing your actions. So when you plan to do something, you must first discuss it with me. Do I make myself clear? No, but do I make myself clear? Yes. In terms of simple fighting prowess, Pollux had nothing on me. Yet, for some reason, I was unable to raise my head in front of her. In all likelihood, even 200 years ago, I was scolded by her for countless things and she was the one holding the reins. Ah. So this is a true advisor, huh? Now that I had a feel for it, I understood how much Dina had been slacking in her role as an advisor. Having said that, this is actually a point that we should reflect back on a bit, of all things, to think that she was the very person who sealed Rupa-sama. This mistress didn't even notice that and was playing cards together with her, HAAA. I didn't notice it and was discussing the proper way to make black tea with her. You guys are just too carefree. Scorpius and Agacaros' fists were shaking as their anger flared up. Nonetheless, the contents of what they were saying were actually quite stupid. The other 12 stars were also in similar conditions and each showed some kind of complicated facial expression. As for Aries and Virgo, from their expressions, rather than anger, it seemed that their sadness from being deceived was stronger. On the other hand, Libra was showing an expression as if to say she had predicted this from the very beginning. Now that I recalled correctly, the one who had doubted Dina the most was Libra. In that case, if we can catch and get the information out of her, we will be able to close in on the G.O.Dis in one go. We weren't acquainted with each other for that long, but she didn't seem like that bad of a girl to me. Be vigilant, older brother. Women are monsters. They can easily put up all sorts of fake outer appearances. Against Castor, Pollux presented him with the reality of the world. Yeah, she might be right. Women are really scary. Although, in terms of what they are, Scorpius and the like are actually monsters. Humph. It's you after all. You probably left her alone whilst saying, I don't know what she's thinking, so it might be interesting to leave her as a subordinate, isn't that right? You being soft on the people you're acquainted with is the same as before, I see, Muffle. Gyu. Being stabbed right where it hurt with what really did happen by Bennett, I was almost taken aback. Yeah, you're right on point, damn it. An advisor who may be hiding some secrets, I think that's interesting on its own. In a way, to have someone dangerous as a subordinate is an exciting scenario. That's the carefree remark I made after that one battle against Dina. What foolishness for, but yeah, for some reason, I can't think of her as an enemy, however hard I try. In any event, largely speaking, there are 4 main things that we need to do from now on. First of all, we have to find the 2 remaining 12 stars, Aquarius and Pisces. Then, we have to track down Dina who has disappeared. And lastly, we have to search for a way to transmigrate the demon race into a fairy race, huh? It seems like there's a need to split into 4 groups. Yeah. Normally, splitting apart the military strength was a bad move. But yeah, well, there's probably no issues whatsoever. Honestly speaking, this lineup is too good. It has an overabundance of fighting prowess. The Blackwing Supreme Ruler, me, the Vampire Princess, Bennett, the Prince of the Demon Race and his close aide, the majority of the 12 stars, and as a bonus, the hero and his party. Thinking about it, what is with this chaotic party? Honestly, with something like this, we could have taken over the world in a single day. And, as a side note, if the goal wasn't domination but destruction, it'd be done in an instant. So scary. Of course, I will be joining the group which will search for a method of transmigration. After all, if I'm not there, nothing would even begin to get done. Besides, there's something that I'm curious about. Allow Luna and I to join in on that too. If Pollux is going, then I'll also tag along with that group. Then me too. I mean, I'm not really useful as a fighting potential, so. The first detachment group to be decided were the fairy siblings, Virgo, and the demonic pair of Terra and Luna. I supposed, considering their end goal, it was only natural. Furthermore, rather than sending Virgo to a dangerous location, if we could send her with the fairy siblings and have her on standby together with them, it would make us feel more relieved. Therefore, there was no problem with this. If I recall correctly, Aquarius is in the scorching region of Muspelheim, right? In that case, the members who are resistant to fire would be optimal to send there. Okay, Aries and Scorpius, you guys go. In the 1 in a million chance that it turns into a battle, Karkanos, who's a good match with Aquarius, you go with them too. For Muspelheim to be named the scorching region, it must have been a place that was really hot. Although every one of us here was resistant to heat to some degree, if it continued for a prolonged period of time, we might end up suffering from something like hyperthermia 5 as such. Sending individuals like Aries and Scorpius who had high resistance to fire was optimal. As for Karkanos, well, he would serve the role of countering Aquarius. If it was just the 2 individuals who possessed a fire attribute, then they would be an absolutely horrible matchup against Aquarius. That's so cruel. This mistress wants to travel together with Rapasama. Scorpionsama. Liberae, you. As usual, Scorpius complained, but I decided to ignore it for now. Recently, I had been getting more and more used to dealing with her. Next was a search party for Pisces whose location was unknown, but I could address this by sending the 2 individuals who excelled in search and detection. To find Pisces, I am sending Libra and Sagittarius. As support, I will add Agacaros. I doubt it will lead to a battle, but just in case, make sure to stay vigilant. I have understood the mission, Master. I will make sure to bring back Eros. Be nice to him and call him Pisces. Well anyway, that should be fine. With Libra and Sagittarius there, they should be able to find him. As for the hero and his party, please move according to your own discretion. I mean, you guys aren't really my subordinates. So it's fine for you to take the action you believe would be best. Why, yes. I purposefully did not specify the young boy SEI's actions. It was because I believed it would turn out better that way. How should I put this? He acted in a way that was out of the expectations. An idea like wanting to reconcile and come to amicable terms with me was a prime example of that. It was something that the other people probably would not even have come up with. I wanted to bank on his trickiness arising out of him being from another world and his ideas which were not bound by common sense. The last thing that remained was the matter about searching for Dina, but I deliberately wanted to go by myself. There shouldn't be any problem in terms of battle potential and I actually want to sit down and talk to her properly. At least, that was what I was thinking, but... Oi, Muffle. Haven't you forgotten about me? You intend to come along. I mean, even if I stay behind in Mjolnir, it's boring. I feel like it'd be more interesting to tag along and observe your movements. From the looks of it, it seemed Bennett wanted to come along. Is this going to be all right? She's not going to start spontaneously attacking me, right? I don't particularly hate Bennett and, if anything, I actually respect her. But she's actually scary because I don't know when she's going to start attacking me. In any event, with this, splitting everyone up into teams was done. What was left was to figure out our modes of transportation so that we could go about reaching our respective destinations. If I were to remodel Tanaka and Suzuki, it would be enough for 2 teams. After including the Heroes Party, I wanted transportation for at least 2 more teams. In the worst-case scenario, Bennett and I could just fly to our location ourselves. Although, in Bennett's case, it's jumping rather than flying. 6 What's left is the means to get to our destinations, huh? In regard to that, please leave it to me, Rappa-sama. Whilst I was thinking that I might create another golem, Castor confidently interjected himself, causing my thought process to be cut off. It seemed he was in possession of some ride that could fly in the sky. Castor matched his sight with that of Pollux's and she nodded lightly in return. Let's do it, Pollux. All right, older brother. Collaboration skill, flags.h.i+p of the heroic spirits. 7 Castor and Pollux held each other's hand and held them up into the air. When they did, light overflowed from their hands and rose high up into the air, slipping past the ceiling. The light did not seem to possess any destructive power as the ceiling which it had said through did not break. Following a brief period of time after this, light gathered in the sky above and an enormous flying s.h.i+p materialized in the air. The people of the city were gazing up into the sky, wondering what was going on after they witnessed the irrational scene of a flying s.h.i+p appearing out of nowhere. This is amazing. In RPG games, it was a popular staple trope for a flying s.h.i+p that could travel across the world map to appear near the end of the game. To think that they could actually make such a thing happen, I was stumped for words. Author note, Rappa's faction has been strengthened quite significantly. Bennett Nash became an ally now in an alliance relations.h.i+p with Mjolnir. Pollux became an ally finally, an intelligent character has become an ally. A few hundred high-level Argonauti heroes who were the subordinates of Rappa's in the past have now become allies, unlimited lives. Many tens of thousands of mob warrior Argonauti heroes who were the subordinates of Rappa's in the past have now become allies, unlimited lives. Dina ceased to become an ally item for moving across the world map. Argo has been acquired. From now on, we will be playing cheerful background music whilst we roam around the world map trying to look for hidden dungeons. Truly just like an RPG. Additionally, it looks like clearing the dungeon would not even take 10 minutes. Due to Pollux and Castor reuniting with each other, we have reached a state where Argonauti can be properly controlled. With this, there will no longer be a situation where they mistakenly kill each other or drag each other down. Due to the introduction of Pollux, we can now have the Argonauti spirits look after the seals of the Ouroboros in place of the 12 stars. This means it is now possible to retrieve the remaining 12 stars. In other words, it is now possible to retrieve Taurus, Aquarius, and Parthenos 8 kings of every kingdom, the Demon King, the G.O.dis, author note end, __1 subsp.a.ce seal technique. 2. The word woman is used with b.i.t.c.h superscript on top. 3. Wait, I thought Libra has no facial expression, lol. 4. Original quote from Chapter 40. 5. Hyperthermia and hypothermia are states at which the human body is at a temperature that it should not be. Hypothermia is diagnosed to have occurred when the body temperature drops below 35 degrees Celsius, 95.0 degrees Fahrenheit, and hyperthermia is diagnosed to have occurred if your body temperature PAS.SES 37.5 or 38.3 degrees Celsius, 99.5 or 100.9 degrees Fahrenheit, depending on the reference used. Note that once your body temperature goes over 40.0 or 41.0 degrees Celsius, 104.0 or 105.8 degrees Fahrenheit, it is called hyperpyrexia. If there are any doctors around and I'm wrong, please let me know since my source is Wikipedia, https://n.wikipedia.org/wiki/hyperthermia. 6. Both were Tobio, so to fly. but the kanji used is different. One is literally to fly, whereas the other is to air, leap/hop/sent flying/shot flying, etc. You get the idea. 7. Collaboration skill, flags.h.I plus p of the heroic spirits. 8. What? Why didn't you do that from the beginning? Also, now that we know Pollux is actually super smart, the inconsistency of her being defeated by Terra and Luna is even bigger. As a side note, I think the author intended the readers to think that Pollux intentionally let those two win. However, the intended effect is not very apparent. Personally, I think Pollux was brought down too much when she was cornered by Luna.